Secretary Mayorkas, you and I have spent a lot of time together. I would dare say that you and I have spent more time together than anyone on this dais. You and I both know there are things the executive branch can do, and there are things that Congress can do to be able to attack this. The challenge becomes trying to get those things implemented to be able to do it. There's a rumor that's out there that the administration's considering a change in 212F authorities, and that there may be some new executive authority used during this time period. Can you give us some insight of what that might be and what is under consideration?
Senator, I'm very proud of the time that we spent together negotiating what would have been a transformative solution to our broken immigration system. We in the government consider consistently all the time what options are available to us. That is the responsibility of good government. We have not made any decisions that I'm in a position to announce today, but I can assure you that we consider all the options before us in executing our responsibilities to the American people.
You have an idea of a time period when that might be implemented? I know you're making some considerations on that. When would we know?
There has been no decision made yet. I don't have a time frame to present to you.
There were clearly, as Senator Johnson mentioned, there are clearly differences in how President Trump enforced the border. There's also differences in how President Obama enforced the border than how it's currently being done now through the same executive authorities of things that were out there. The negotiated agreements with Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador at the time that President Trump had achieved, we don't have that same kind of agreement with them. I've had some Guatemalan leaders that have reached out to me and said, we want to reestablish some of those same type of agreements that are there to be able to get that. We don't have some of the same enforcement mechanisms. I know the court stepped back in and said the remain in Mexico, the MPP, we've got to be able to reinstitute. The facility was changed on it, but the enforcement is different. There are differences that are there. I think what needs to be done here is President Biden, DHS, to use all the levers that you have to be able to enforce the border, as President Obama did and as President Trump did. This Congress also has a responsibility as well. What we had negotiated together was doubling the number of deportation flights, dramatically increasing the number of detention beds, increasing agents, increasing officers, increasing the number of immigration judges, increasing asylum officers, changing the definition of asylum so that there's a more rapid turnaround in that process, changing the process for expedited removal so that you're not hamstrung with some of the court decisions that have been made in the past. All of those things were dramatic changes that Congress needs to do. So I've been hard on members here to say we've got work that we've got to do, but you and I have had frank conversations as well to be able to say there are things that the administration can do. I encourage State Department to be more focused on recalcitrant countries and turning people around. I encourage Department of Justice to be more clear on enforcement of things that they're not doing either right now. But the frustration that you hear from the dais here is a sense that, yeah, Congress has things that we need to do, but we don't feel like State Department, DOJ, and DHS is using every tool at their resource. So I would tell you, we're eager to see the 212F and what is being determined at this point and what can be done, because this last number I saw, I think we had about 5,800 people that crossed yesterday. And so obviously that's an intolerable number for everybody on it. If I can ask a quick question as well, you and I have talked several times about special interest aliens. This is a different group out there that's been difficult to get information about. It's a group that DHS has defined for a while as folks with a potential for a national security risk. We understand there are thousands of individuals that have been designated as a special interest alien, but we can't get any information on it. This committee that has the oversight has had one briefing on it, and it was last year. That was a bipartisan briefing, and Senator Sinema and I worked for months to be able to get that one classified briefing on it. Since that briefing time, we've asked for a follow-up, and we've gotten nothing on it to get details. How many special interest aliens? Where are they coming from? What are the details on those? These are folks that your team has identified as a potential national security risk. We don't know how they're being handled, but it is our understanding thousands of them are being released. Can you give us any clarity on that, and can you give us a time that we'll be able to get access to that information about those folks?
Senator, I'm very disappointed to hear that you feel that we haven't provided you with the information you've requested with respect to special interest aliens. I will work with my team to ensure a briefing of those of you who are interested in this very important subject in an appropriate setting.
Great. We have followed up. I have a list here of the number of requests. We've had 6 formal requests to your office just this calendar year, and every time we've not received an answer to it. So we absolutely need more information about this, because that's a very special concern to us, to try to figure out how do we actually get that resolved. On the budget request that's coming out, when you and I worked on the supplemental piece, we included funding for 50,000 detention beds and for deportation flights to be dramatically increased. Part of the issue was, obviously, if we're releasing people, especially single adults, it just increases the number of people that are coming. If we don't turn people around, there aren't immediate consequences, then more people just come because there's a delayed consequence, which is really no consequence. So my question is, in the budget request, we're to 34,000 beds for budget request. Why that number, when we know we could get up to 50,000, or at least to 40,000 we could get up to? Why a lower number in a budget request rather than the number that you know you need?
Senator, you know, the budget is, of course, presented under the context of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Our 2025 budget was presented before the 2024 budget was enacted. We fully support the 41,500 detention beds that were presented in the fiscal year 2024 budget. I continue to believe that in the context of the Senate's bipartisan legislation, the 50 or 55,000 beds was an advancement in our efforts, and we look forward to working with this committee and Congress on funding the detention beds that are needed.
I hope that's so. We've got to be able to get that resolved. That's a serious issue that only Congress can resolve, but we've got to be able to implement. We need the White House to also make the request on it. One last thing I'll just ask for the record, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, on this. DHS Ombudsman for Citizenship and Immigration Services found this statement: the parole programs that are currently being used at our southern border that are allowing more people to come in, the parole programs require diverting funding and employee resources within USCIS from other immigration programs. We've experienced this in our office. It's become harder for legal immigration, and the Ombudsman is saying it's because some of these resources are being funneled to the border processing parole there. Love to have a statement back from your office in writing on if that's true, what's being done to be able to change it. If it's not true, why is that not true?
Thank you, Senator Lankford, and I appreciate trying to stay on that timeline. I appreciate that. For those of you who weren't here, we have our colleagues are all trying to. Everybody wants to ask questions. Everybody is scheduling tightly, so if you try to stay to your time, I would appreciate that.